AI is the best thing since sliced white bread. Except it's kind of like Wonderbread in the sense that it's lacking all the nutrients and really has no substance. Well, I found sort, as most of you also did. I was scrolling along the feed and sure thing, text to video pops up from OpenAI's new model that creates a realistic image based off of whatever it was trained on, but they don't tell you exactly what it was trained on. Now, as a freelance VFX artist, I am not actually worried at all. I don't think you should be. I don't think AI is taking over anytime soon. For example, in order for AI to be functional, we need a consistency across your images from shot 1 to shot 1005. They need to have the same characters in every way. I'm talking there can be no nuance to the shape of their face and the way that their eyes twinkle. The emotions need to remain consistent. Everything has to be pixel perfect and move in accordance with how physics actually work in that world that the director is creating. If you just think that you're going to be able to plug in a prompt and get an image that actually tells a meaningful story, you're sadly mistaken. You need a keen eye as well as just a lot of time finding what works and what doesn't work. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm completely against AI because I'm not. I use AI in my day-to-day. Since I actually started using Nuke instead of After Effects, I've found myself training my own copycat models or using some of the ones from the category. And those are excellent. They have depth maps and all type of motion vector stuff, and you can get pretty solid maps using ModNet. And I've found it, particularly helpful to expedite the process. But once again, you're not really able to get a full perfect result. It just sometimes will cut a few corners to get you further. Listen, AI is consistently great at being wrong. And it's good at mimicking whatever it was trained off of. I would say that it is incredibly impressive that it has gotten this far, but I'm not seeing it. And if AI is nowhere near where it needs to be to actually be production ready for anything by the standards of Hollywood. Personally, I don't think it's ethical to just be scraping data off the internet and grabbing anything you can. I believe that you should do your due diligence. It is a direct byproduct of what it is fed. I think that people, they crave authenticity. They're already feeling disconnected with movies today because it's just the same Marvel VFX spit out and slapped onto everything, and they're even putting less attention into it. So the idea of people being accepting and embracing towards AI when there's even less intention and it's even more dramatic, it's hard for me to believe that that's going to be something that is taken well, especially when you consider how against people are towards VFX and CGI as is. Everybody gives a bad name to CGI. They act like it's something that the computer is just magically doing for us, and we aren't putting in these manual hours to really curate something. And at the end of the day, we are data manipulators that have to go through extensive rounds of revisions. And this is the main piece where I really feel like AI actually fails. When you're talking about a scenario with a client where they're giving you notes and you're trying to change just little pieces, you're going to have a very hard time maintaining consistency. So you need to change this, that, or the third thing. It doesn't actually matter, but they're just continuously adding. There's all types of personal choices that artists have to make on the daily, and you're gonna be biting yourself in the foot if you don't know how to control these nuances. If you only rely on AI and it spits out an image and you're able to get by, like that's great. Good for you. You got what you needed and you're using it to tell your story in the most affordable way, and it's effective. And if it's effective, then I'm all for it. But you won't have the control. And when you want to get that very specific look, you're gonna have a hard time. And I feel like this is gonna enable people to create a bunch more fluff. I don't think a lot of good quality work is going to be coming out. I think that there's gonna be a bunch of noise from people who think that their work is something worth talking about, when in actuality, it's not really their work at all because they only entered in a prompt. There's nothing organic about AI. I find it kind of funny to imagine a world where people are fighting with one another over who stole whose prompt when nobody's talking about where that generated image stole its training set from. Because at the end of the day, just because it's generative doesn't really mean that it's custom and it's organic. I just have a hard time expecting that the audience is really going to take that well. The audience wants something that they feel like had soul put into it. They want something from another human. They don't want just another piece. Now, once again, the cost to develop AI is just as exponential as the data sets that are being trained. It's as good as you feed into it. But the more information that you feed into it and the larger the data sets are, the more processing power you're going to need, the more storage you're going to need. You're talking supercomputers with lots of energy and high payloads. I think that the majority of people that are going to find use out of this, it's going to be kids. Again, they're just lacking consistency, as if it's just trying to find a way to go from frame 1 to frame 5 in the smoothest way possible, but it's changing the facial shape, it's changing the bone structure and the muscle structure and the anatomy of the person. It's just wrong. Without humanity, AI is nothing more than just an over-glamorized magic trick. It's giving you the illusion of doing something accurately, but it's not actually giving you the correct result. So if anyone can do it, then how valuable is it? And what happens when you lose access to the network that has your models trained on? What happens when you can't create anything without AI's assistance? In a lot of sense, this has actually inspired me to take my direction in VFX towards more of a data manipulation side. I want to understand how things work on the backbone rather than, for example, After Effects having this pretty UI that makes things easier and holds my hand along through the process. I want to see each and every piece being done to my plate all the way from the beginning until the end, and I want nothing to be done except for what I tell it to do, which is why I've transitioned to using Nuke and to using Houdini and to trying to learn how to code my own systems. I believe that that level of control is going to be something that is sought after in the future. And when things go wrong, they will rely on us to fix them. So in some ways, I think you will be actually gaining value to be even more well-versed in the intricacies of how this technology works, how you can utilize it, but also how you can, okay, it failed. How can I make it myself? How can I not rely on this as a standalone process? One thing that makes me really optimistic about it is the fact that there really isn't proper AI roto. They don't do a pixel perfect accurate job. Your edges will get messed up. You'll have boiling pixels. You'll have random blank spots. The motion blur won't necessarily be correct. There's problems with it that require manual fixing. And you don't even have AI driven UV mapping. So I don't know, but I do know that they will try to cut costs and they will try to cut corners. And ultimately, if anyone's going to be at a loss of money, it is not the artist, but it will be the studio. And I think Hayao Miyazaki's quote, the guy who created Spirited Away, aka the Studio Ghibli genius, he said it better than I ever could. I can't watch this stuff and find interesting. Whoever creates this stuff has no idea what pain is or whatsoever. I am utterly disgusted. I would never wish to incorporate this technology into my work at all. I strongly feel that this is an insult to life itself. I feel like we are nearing the end of times. We humans are losing faith in ourselves. People enjoy art because they know what it took to get there. They know what the individual who was creating the art went through to convey this emotion. It's not necessarily about if it's pretty image or not. It is about what that image means to the individual. How did they get to a place where they could create such a beautiful image? And what effect does that have on me? That's what art is. It doesn't matter really what your final product was, and it doesn't matter if you're just prompting something up. At the end of the day, if you have an eye, you'll use whatever tool and you'll convey whatever message, and that's art. But if we're talking about just some individual that doesn't know the first thing, hasn't stepped foot in any type of creative field or endeavor at all, just typing up a prompt, clicking enter, and saying, oh, yes, I conveyed this emotion, but they came up with it after the fact. Listen, I don't think art has to be meaningful, but I do feel like there is a level of you're putting your heart and your soul into something. And without that, it is just pretty pixel. You know what I mean? I think that there will be a time where people want to know when things are created with AI, and I believe that this is really just going to lead to a bunch of misinformation in a pretty disgusting political way where you're going to have to really watch out for what you fall for. And I think that scammers are going to have a payday for probably the next 5 to 15 years until the older generation kind of cuts out. But in terms of entertainment, I'm not really worried. I don't think it's going to replace filmmakers. I don't really think that it's going to even replace VFX artists. So I wouldn't be worried either. I would just keep doing what you're doing, keep refining your eye, keep focusing on what matters, which is the story and what you're trying to create, and create it. And if you find yourself using some AI tools, great. Just try to make sure, in my opinion, that they're coming from a source that isn't being completely ripped off of, you know? I don't think we need to be worried about it taking our jobs as much as we need to be worried about it in more of a militaristic authoritarianship type sense, where security cameras could potentially get facial recognition that will log every piece of footage that is ever captured of each individual in every city. So that's scarier to me than imagining AI ever being good enough to do text to video. Listen, the simulations aren't accurate. The pixels aren't accurate. Everything is just mishmash blah. And you put it up on a big screen, we're going to have some problems. I'm excited to see what kids make with it, but I don't know. I think it's kind of being blown out of proportions. And I think the AI bros are really thinking that this is the thing, but it's not as smart as everyone's making it out to be. So I just think you should remember that. It's not as smart as you think it is, and it's only as good as the data it's trained off of. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to seize the day and keep learning. If there's ever been a time to refine a skill, it's now. So do your thing. I don't know.